Good evening, everyone. I'm your host, Jason Miles, and welcome to another episode of This is Revolution Podcast. So sorry that I missed the sports fans of the TIR gang. I was not available to do the show. A friend was in town. He works with a pretty large band, and I thought I was going to be able to do the show from the backstage area, but it was a big production, and it was way too chaotic to even attempt to do it. So Mac and I have rescheduled the show for tomorrow. We're going to do the show tomorrow at 5 p.m. Pacific time. A little earlier than we usually do because it's an off night for him that he doesn't always have prepared. But he is so fired up to do the sports show because he has so much to say about. I know one of the things he's really amped to talk about is Deion Sanders, and I'm pretty excited for you guys to hear that riffage that he has prepared for that. But I'm back. I'm here. I won't be leaving you guys again like I did yesterday. So sorry. But today we're going to talk about masters of the universe. When we, and by we, I mean I, think of masters of the universe, we may be reminded of He-Man with his mighty sword standing guard at Castle Grayskull against Skeletor and his monstrous allies. But in Professor Rob Larson's latest book, Masters of the Universe, The Obscene Wealth of the Ruling Class, What They Do with Their Money, and Why You Should Hate Them Even More. Yes, that is the title, folks. There are no animated heroes or villains. Instead, Larson presents us with the all-too-real battle between the 1% and the rest of the world, where the obscene wealth of the elite continues to grow unchecked, resulting in deepening inequality, environmental devastation, and an entrenchment of power that threatens democracy itself. That title may sound exaggerated, but Larson methodically explains how the ruling class wields unimaginable wealth, shaping global economic, political, and environmental outcomes in their favor. As Larson writes, quote, "The system isn't broken, it's rigged. For the wealthy, inequality isn't a bug in the system, it's the feature," unquote. Since the Occupy movement brought the 1% into the national consciousness, this elite class has only fortified its hold over our institutions, exploiting crises like the COVID-19 pandemic to increase their fortunes even further. Today, we'll delve into the moral, economic, and environmental obscenities of extreme wealth with Rob Larson, exploring how the elites use their fortunes to maintain power and destroy the planet. We'll also examine what, if anything, can be done to dismantle this concentrated power before it's too late. Please welcome, coming all the way live from the great Northwest, professor and economist, Rob Larson.
Hi, Jason.
You doing?
Hi, man. How are you?
Pretty good.
Excellent. The studio audience is, they were quiet until just now. So,
well, they're excited for this. I'm reading the script, so thank God I can't see the chat. So I can't see if people are saying good or bad things. But one I have to ask you first off, what's your deal with rich people, man? I was just, there was so much traffic yesterday. I've never seen this much traffic on this side of the border that I walked across for the first time and took a taxi to this venue where a friend of mine was working. He's working for this band, and it was a big amphitheater. Thousands of people were there. So these are all rock stars. The rock stars were there. What's your deal with obscene wealth, man? You don't like good catering at your shows?
Let me say, I know some really wealthy people personally, and they actually are generally very nice, just through a couple of long friendships that where people ended up marrying into wealth sort of accidentally. I've gotten to know a few wealthy families over the long years, and they're often perfectly nice people, broadly speaking.
Mm.
The deal with wealthy people for me is that they control everything and they're killing us all, I guess, is the deal. They seem nice. It's just we're all dying. I mean, I guess it's the death at the end of the day that's upsetting me. So it's related to that.
I'll make sure next time I'm around these obscenely wealthy people to be like, hey, no, I'm just kidding. I'm going to keep my
Yeah,
mouth
bring
shut
it up. Yeah.
so my friend keeps his job. Rob, you write, the ruling class isn't just wealthy, they control the mechanisms of society itself. How do we define the ruling class today, and what sets them apart from just being wealthy? And what are the dangers of this level of concentrated power in a global economy?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of ways to chop it up, and generally, if you look at any society, ours or others, there's different ways you can, draw cross sections and, yeah, chop up the different structures or strata or levels,
Mhm.
of society. So there's different ways to do it. Typically, people like to do it just with money. Everyone knows that if you're at the bottom, you're poor, and you're at the top, you're rich, or maybe rich and powerful. So that's conventional way of doing it, and that has its own uh, lessons to teach us, I think. But I talk about the ruling class specifically. Yeah, it's not just the rich class or something like that. Ruling definitely speaks to control over what happens in the society and the ability to make things happen
Mhm.
or prevent them from happening if you don't like them. And that usually speaks to the idea of social power. So if you can make something happen you want or prevent something from happening you don't want, that's what power is in society. And governments and companies and wealthy people and, churches and media have different forms and kind of levels of power and influence. That's fine. When it comes to the ruling class specifically, I would say you're looking at the groups of people and really households, like families
Mhm.
that are in a position to make those, or they have members that are in the position to make those big, powerful decisions about what will happen. And fundamentally, that means the households that own the big corporate firms that run the economy,
Mhm.
and those families that are very politically active in your higher decision-making echelons of the state. Today, with capitalism, it's broadly those two, and of course, there's a ton of overlap there. But to me, when it comes to like the economics of the ruling class, because everyone knows, government figures have power. When it comes to the ruling class, we're usually looking at households, yes, that are rich, no doubt, but they're specifically rich in the form of ownership of corporate stock. So remember, corporations that run our economy and they
Mhm.
buy up venues and move our sports teams around and close
Mhm.
down companies and so on.
Mhm.
Uh, those are large corporate entities and they have a lot of power, but they belong to someone. Usually, it's their stockholders, their corporate equity investors. And there you're looking at the richest households. One of the most important things I would say in the book is the research that we have on stock ownership. The richest 1% of households by wealth, just to go with that common method for now,
Mhm.
they own about 40% of total US stock. And the richest 10% of households own 83% of corporate stock, like almost all of it.
Doesn't
And
that
that's
mean
how I
like
would define it.
that's in like the first, I think that's in the introduction, or is it the first chapter? It's pretty early.
Somewhere in the front, yeah.
Yeah, it's early on in the book where you define that. Um, which I find interesting because I always meet someone who plays the stock market, and whenever I talk to this person, I feel like I'm talking to a handicapper that years ago he said, "Oh, I play the ponies." Right? Somebody that you dealt with horse racing, and there really is no difference. I have brought this same thing up that you lay out there verbatim, that you're playing a game where, and then when you say playing a game, they always look at you like, no, this is science. There's a news program about it. There's a guy yelling with a shirt and a tie. There's always a guy
There's
with the sh-
numbers on the bottom of the screen.
there's a
That's science.
Chiron that's been ticking since I have. There's large news sections dedicated to it. When this thing doesn't work, apparently everybody's hurting. Ergo, you're wrong. This is science. I say, okay, but a handful of people are controlling this. This is no different than Vegas.
Yeah, certainly there's a huge gambling feature to it. A lot of what happens in financial markets, yeah, is about, I think this commodity price will go down. Everyone thinks it'll go up. Ha ha, I was right, you were wrong, and I can arbitrage that price. Getting stinking rich off that stuff is a lot of what goes on in the world of finance, man. But yeah, that ownership of that physical capital by way of owning the stock, to me, that's kind of the definition of the ruling class because you own that like productive wealth, like not your personal property, like your clothes or your car, or even your like real estate if you have some of that, but ownership of the productive wealth of society, the wealth that makes more wealth, like big agricultural estates, manufacturing complexes, oil refineries, data centers. Like those are the big physical assets. Mostly they belong to companies. Physical capital, we call that. The economic system grows that stuff a lot, so we call it capitalism. But that to me is the real definition of the ruling class, that small sector. It's
Mhm.
pretty thin top crust of households there that has enough ownership of the stock to not only survive on that passive income from their investment portfolio if they wish, but the being in the position to make decisions on that. You know, stockholders are usually represented on corporate boards and so on. And the big danger, to answer the original question,
Mhm.
that comes from that in a global economy is that if people decide they don't like this, and they try to rise up against it or get a labor movement or some taxation on these guys, there's a lot of scope for these firms to pull up stakes and close their factories or operations in your country and go to some other one that's a little more desperate and will take a while to wise up and realize they don't want these guys either. So to me, that's the big danger is that globally, you know, most of us live in the country that we're in. Whereas companies can go any damn place and kind of
Anywhere.
play us against each other in that way.
Do we love this level of wealth? Um, it seems like, excuse me, it's a celebrity that is somewhat celebrated. I mean, we elected one of these people as president, um, and someone that inherited their wealth kind of ran on a ticket of "I'm just like you."
Yeah.
And to this day, there's still some of this element out there in the voting ether of people that I don't think Donald Trump is going to win the presidency, but there's definitely people that believe he speaks to a working class. And my first thing when I hear this stuff quite often, I'm always like, well, why would you think that a person that inherited everything understands or cares about you? Like you inherited nothing. You're sitting next to me at a bar, so I know you inherited nothing.
Yeah.
So
It is true, man. Like people have that tendency, yeah, to celebrate people who get rich. I mean, that's been a really distinctly American thing for a long time. You know, down the centuries, the few centuries of our history. That's true. And the Trump thing is an interesting case. You know, I mean, definitely a celebrity. There's definitely a cross section of the country that loves him because he's rich and because they think he got rich. He was born rich, of course. That goes a long way, you know. Although I would add too, you know, we say we elected this guy. Like, remember, he lost the number of human votes twice,
mhm.
but in the United States, that only sometimes matters. You know, oh, you won the number of votes, but did you win the square shapes that the voters are standing in? Ah, you didn't. You fucked up. That's the brilliance of this country. Is no downsides. But yeah, the loving the money thing is real. You know, like Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous,
Yeah.
and every soap is about a rich family. You know, I mean, people have, you know, and all the way up to like Succession and Schitt's Creek and everything. People love these shows about like changing class levels or what goes on in the higher wealth echelons and stuff, and that's fine. But you discover like there are limitations to what we know about it. I try to get into that in the book a little bit. It's easy to go on YouTube and watch a video where it's a tour of a $20 million yacht or something like that. You need to like learn what it's like actually on there, where you have live-in staff who do all your work for you and are living on the boat with you while you're there, but you have a giant fancy comfy room and they have like really crappy bunks with like horrible fluorescent lighting and stuff like that. So it's like the lived reality of this stuff that I try to get into a little bit more in the book, rather than just, like the cult of wealth. Look how fancy this granite countertop is. Oh my goodness. Like, what about the penniless person who someone rich pays to stand right next to them and chop their food for them while they scroll? Like, that's what's interesting.
I appreciated that, because there's a few things I've watched in the last few years that really kind of shocked me to a certain point about showing off a certain level of opulence and people not even getting it. There was a documentary about, Imelda Marcos.
Sure, like famous one. Oh
yeah. From like maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And there's a scene where, she lives in the Philippines, where it's very common, especially if you have even a little bit of money, you have servants, because poverty is so high and class differences are so glaring. And she's outside of her house, and she's looking at these pictures, and they're all like with glass frames, and she knocks one down on accident. And then when you see the servant just go like hurry and sweep it up, you're just like, man, this woman's kind of a horrible bitch. Like, but she also shows herself like handing out pesos to the poor kids.
Yes.
She's a woman of the people.
Yeah, there's a camera crew here today, so I've got lots of pesos to give out while my servant kind of reacts to accidents in a way that suggests I scream at them a lot.
Right. And you see that. And then there's this other thing that I recently was hip to called fridge scaping.
I don't know that one. That's
where you basically are landscaping your refrigerator. You're putting all the food in a certain way. You have all the containers. You might even get the fridge where you can kind of look inside there's like a screen or something where you can. And you pay for someone to fridge scape.
Yeah, no one works on the feng shui of their crisper drawer. And I feel like that is, again, one of the many important arts that, if it wasn't for the rich, would not be preserved. So what about that, working class people?
And but it's being presented to kind of this middle class of America, where it's like, you probably have enough credit and make enough money to like go on a vacation. So this is the lifestyle you need to lead. Kind of it's right adjacent to like the trad wife that's doing everything from scratch. And it's like, who has the effing time?
Yeah, it's all mystique. It's all mystique. Yeah, like, oh, as far as you know, I'm just at home doing traditional wife things, or yes, having my investing a lot of my time in organizing the condiments so that they slope downwards and with alternating colors. But again, bear in mind how much this stuff is, for it's theater of the mind. Like, it's for presentation to mess with you. The reality may be that, it may be not. And if it is what you see on camera, it's because they have labor that they pay. As you said, they've got domestic help or whatever it is that's letting them have all these fun conveniences and glamorous fixtures, and plenty of time still to like have a personal trainer and nutritious meals in post. You can't do all those things at the same time. You do them by having a staff, for God's sake.
You have to. There's no way in the world you can do that.
Absolutely have to. Yeah, that's something that I would just say about it. Yeah, with the love of money, it's like it's labor that makes all these things work. Like these yachts, like have like these, the fancy yachts that you see on YouTube. They have staff of like a couple dozen people. Like a lot of people, like a large number of people who are sleeping on that boat with you every night and somehow not killing you. I mean, I'm sure they have, you hold their visas or something. You can control people, but that to me is the interesting stuff. Yeah, is like, and again, that class distinction is just who owns and who works for the people who own things. That's a lot more important, I would say, than like the blue versus white collar kind of in the middle class distinctions, which are meaningful and have real impact, but compared to whether or not you can have to work in some way or just own enough wealth that you can live off that, that's the meaningful class cleavage in society.
What do you say when those rich people say, well, I'm a job creator, I just hired 4 people and we're on international waters, so I don't have to pay any sort of living wage.
That's great. Technically, you aren't hired until we sail 20 miles out of the port, when the civil laws no longer apply. That was not part of the application form.
Mm.
Yeah, the job creation thing's really big. I mean, and as you saw, I have a whole chapter in the book that is just specifically about the various lies and giant phony alibis that people have created to justify the incredible wealth and power and social privilege that rich households have. And this is, one of those very, very top ones. I'm a job creator. I run a company, and my company hires people to make a product that I sell. So I'm a job creator. You should be glad that I'm here creating a job for you. Now shut up and get back to work. Like that is a feeling you will hear. The thing is, well, it's just funny. Like based on that, like everyone who's powerful is great. I mean, look, dictators and military occupiers are job creators. Like being a job creator just implies you're in a position of social hierarchy or privilege that puts you in a position to create a role for someone. Many of us would like to create a job. You have to be in a position of running a firm of some size or owning capital before you can do that. Feudal lords, I mean, hell, it is a fact that classic American U.S. South slave owners were job creators. Like that's how you're going to argue with that. They hired people in addition to their slave labor.
Yeah.
Oh, the job creators. Oh, well, fantastic. I didn't realize you're a job creator, Tsar of Russia. Let me stop criticizing you forever. Like, that's not a great defense. It only sounds good if you're like, yeah, great job creators. Thank you. Like, if you're just not going to think about it any further, it works fine. Difficult to justify.
You say in your book, wealth is generated by labor, but the ruling class doesn't labor. They accumulate. Can you explain how wealth is accumulated by the ruling class without actual production or labor, and what systemic forces allow for the continuous enrichment of the elite?
Great. Yeah, sure. So how can you accumulate without labor? Well, I mean, fundamentally, it's about property rights. If you are able to be in that position where you own in the early days, mainly the land and what early industry or like crafts exist, you are in the position to not just like run them day by day and decide, who gets to have a job created for them and who gets to have a firing created for them. Like you have that position. But remember, especially in this era of capitalism and greater wealth and greater money flows, what you're in a position to do if you like run the corporate, if you have a senior position in the corporate world or, a significant position in government, you're in a position to be influential over investment. Like taking money today to build up something different tomorrow, investing in a new industry or in infrastructure or in health or whatever. That's a position of really extreme power. That's mostly held by your like high level financial, mostly capitalists and some of the senior people in tech. So that's how that wealth is accumulated without working, is through owning the assets that people work with to create goods. We don't own the people anymore, but you own the oil refinery or the factory, and they come in and they work for you. They make more value than you pay them, and that's where profitability is derived. And that's fundamentally, at the end of the day, what it's about, is being in a position where people believe in, or really where you're in a position to enforce your property rights and gain ownership of wealth that's created by other people doing work with tools and in a factory setting or a work setting that you provide, and that's pretty important. You can't do that stuff without like a lot of, so any social system requires, a big infrastructure, like a legal or social infrastructure to make it work. People have to believe that you give a tenth of your harvest to the Lord under feudalism, and people have to accept that, well, yes, you work for a living, and the boss has a right to make a profit too, just like I get my microscopic paycheck. So that's social support there through all those enabling institutions and governments that tax us so that we can have roads and bridges. Without those, you can't have big markets and big economic growth. You can ship goods to people all over the place. So all those things are pretty essential to become rich in the modern economic system. Then, of course, people will turn around and say, I built it. I did it. Mm-hmm. It was me. I built it. My workers just came and left. I don't even know why they were there. And maybe the government, fought a war and took over this part of the world, and now I'm building up my industry here. But still, I did it. People have a lot of comforting ideas about these things.
What do you say when you're confronted? I'm sure this has to come across when you're teaching. Someone says to you, but Professor Larson, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, you can't deny these people aren't job creators. There's people that literally work for them. My uncle works for them and makes good money. My uncle works for Microsoft, and We get to go on vacations at his house and that island. Oh, what's the Puget Sound?
Yes, Hood Canal is where his big vacation, his family estate is. Yes, a part of Puget Sound there. Yeah, no doubt. I could say like, yeah, they're job creators, but like that doesn't justify anything they do. Like
Mhm.
that doesn't justify their position in authority. Again, any powerful figure can create an economic role for someone. You know,
Mhm.
and that's true if I'm a CEO of a hedge fund or the owner of a big tech platform or some fascist dictator. Like, great, I'm creating a job for you. Go shoot the Russians and shut up. That is job creation as well. So to me, the job creation thing isn't like a lie. It just doesn't like mean anything or
Mhm.
justify the people and certainly the lifestyles that
Mhm.
always gets deployed to justify.
Especially when we talk about the job, right? It's a Amazon warehouse. It's like,
Yeah, once you look at the jobs themselves, it does weaken further. Yeah, because it's always, well, this job doesn't have to be so horrible, but it's if we make it slightly more humane for you and we allow you to take a break between Amazon deliveries so that you don't have to piss into a water jug, then we lose a penny of revenue per share, and I don't get my Christmas bonus. Our stock gets downgraded. Jeff Bezos cries a single tear. You don't want that. So
we don't
because
want
we're in a
Bezos
position to
tears. Yeah,
decide, we will make your job shittier.
yeah.
Pee in the cup.
Like Bezos tears mean we all are peeing in cups at this point, so can't have that. I'm
I
not
think
moving
we're
in
all
with
peeing in
my
the cups of
mom.
society. Yeah.
I'm not moving in with my mom because you don't want to work faster. I'm not moving in with my mom because you dare have heat stroke in this unair conditioned place.
That gets tougher and tougher, man.
It really is, and there's a lot of propaganda. I think that actually kind of reinforces the job creation of the wealth. The Oscar award-winning Nomadland, I found, would be antithetical
Yes.
to your whole work, considering that book
Interesting. Yeah.
is in line with everything you're saying. That book, I think, is like you wrote a very angry book.
Look, it has statistics in it too. I mean, if
It's a fun, angry read that I think people that watch shows like this would really enjoy. It's also informative. I'm not going to lie and say it's not. But a book like Nomadland is a great companion piece because it gives you the human side. Here are the human stories of everything Rob is talking about. If you're looking at this and seeing it as almost an abstraction, here's the book that goes, oh no, this is the real damage
hmm.
of the system in which we exist in and what's happening today.
Yeah, I heard
Because
that about
yeah.
the book itself. I did see the film. I was dragged to see it by a certain girlfriend of mine who will remain nameless and
Mm.
who lost her let's go see this movie privileges in time after this stink bomb. Holy tomatoes. You know, Frances McDormand, who doesn't love her? She's
She's a great
great.
actress.
She's
Yeah.
great in so many fun movies we've all enjoyed. That movie stinks. And anything critical of society, it's just like just systematically removed. I couldn't believe it when my friend told me about the book, which I did not read.
Yeah.
The movie's quite bad, and it definitely doesn't go anywhere near things like really criticizing capital or the rich, things that might make you uncomfortable. You do get full frontal Frances McDormand in one brief scene, though. So, they
There you go.
giveth, they taketh away.
There you go. We're bringing back, older nude scenes. I'm all for it. Um, but in all seriousness, there's people in the movie who are depicted in the book as having repetitive injuries that prevented them from working at Amazon, literally doing the things in the movie that they can't do from that job.
God, just anything critical will get sponged away before it's in a medium where someone might see it. Like as soon as it's in a mass medium, well, we'll remove the unsavory
Oh
elements.
yeah, yeah, and it's uh, maybe people went to go read the book. I don't know. I know a
I
lot
do
of
now.
it's not the love affair with homelessness. As someone that has lived in a van, I literally have, and not in that romantic way that you see
Yeah,
in the
not
movie.
as not as dramatic as depicted.
I've never met someone outside of people with money and I want to repeat this again, outside of people with money. In like 2013 or 14 when we were touring, we were coming across a lot of younger people, a little bit younger than us. We were in our mid 30s around that time. They were doing the van life thing. And they had these really sick, like decked out vans, and they would just like hold up somewhere and just like, oh, I'm going to be in Baja for a month. Oh, we're going to be in this place. We're going to be in Yosemite for a month. And what do you do for work? If they did work, they worked remotely.
Yes, very remotely.
Or they just didn't. They're like, we're taking the year off. It is a certain privilege.
Oh yeah,
to live that lifestyle, to be so nomadic.
Yeah, it comes from the ability to be so detached from the work realities that keep all what keeps us from doing that. Well, I got to get to my job, or I can't pay the rent. I kind of can't pay it already. It's true. If you're going to be able to be that nomadic, you need passive income or some incredibly lucrative, very remote working job. It is annoying. So many things like that have a free spirited affect. Completely rely upon that insane wealth. Like the Coachella type of festival is a good example of this. Everyone's there and having fun and like living free and wearing fun things and doing whatever they want for the better part of a week. And it's quite expensive to be there.
Very.
So you came in the door rich, sounds like a lot, you see that in like a lot of forms. It's pretty annoying. People always bring up that in the original, back in the old days, if I recall this correctly, the U.S. Senate did not pay. Like there was no pay for being a U.S. senator.
Oh, wow.
You just had to be that rich. Like it was just like, well, you're obviously rich. You're a landowner or, later a capitalist, that kind of U.S., founding generation is kind of pre-capitalist. It's amazing, like you didn't pay anything. Oh, so poor people can do it. No, so only the rich could hold the position. Amazing shit. And to this day, like, being the president pays like $400 a year or some like extremely modest salary by the standards of people like, for example, George Bush's family, who also, George W. Bush, who also did that. I'm just folks. People want to hang out with me. People vote for me because I'm just one of them. And, he came from a rich aristocratic family. His father was the head of the CIA and the president. They all have this like, no, I'm just like you. And because none of them offer any positive policies to people, that's half of what people react to now is just, do you have a charming, kind of folksy presentation of some type? That's like 50% of what people are looking for because there's none of that policy there because these people all come from this class.
Do you think there's something to be said about, kind of our love for those folksy accents? I really do believe, and I've had this conversation with Ben Burgess, our mutual friend.
Of course.
I said, if Bernie Sanders talked like Gavin Newsom and Donald Trump didn't have that Queens accent, those two wouldn't have been so important and transformative in 2016.
Interesting. Yeah, regional. It is interesting. Regional accents in America.
Like and those particular accents.
Yeah, like those Metro New York accent.
Brooklyn Jew and this Queens guy. Hey, I'm a guy. I'm just like you guys. I'm a guy.
Yeah, like something. It does have like an effect on people of creating like, oh, he's from that part of the country. I knew a guy from out there, good guy. Like, it's such a gigantic country, and it's so socially dislocated. People have like such broken like friend and family networks these days. People move so much, that I think things like that, like, oh, I remember when I used to live out there. Like, it just has an effect on people that if you've got the bland, generic American accent, which certainly most politicians have. It's a competitive disadvantage, I would say, for better or worse. Like it definitely, and obviously it helps you stand out, but it plays some role because politics now is so cosmetic. This cosmetic shit really has a lot of importance now. So, some sociologists should explain it to me because I don't understand it, but I can see important.
Just the pantomiming of I'm just like you, and I'm going to lean heavy on these accents.
Oh my God, I'm going to be the president. How can I help you?
Yeah, oh my.
It's just, and they just have power. I don't get it myself. Someone in the chat, explain it to me.
So here's a long question I have for you. It's more of a talking conversation point. How does wealth inequality create social, economic, and political instability? And why do you feel this part of capitalism is part of capitalism's design? I was speaking with a man in a bar last Sunday, and he was frustrated with the state of politics and what he saw as corruption where he was from in Los Angeles. At times, when I tried to explain to him that he was complaining about simply capitalism, he looked me right in the eye and said that that's not real capitalism, and socialism has never worked anywhere. Name one place where socialism works. I asked him to then name a socialist country presently, and he couldn't. This Cold War end of history attitude seems to me to be more prevalent today than it was 30 years ago before the fall of the Soviet Union. How would you address someone like this who sees capitalism as bad only when bad people are greedy and not just a feature of the system?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. And a lot of conservatives really try to draw a line there. Usually, though, rather than specifically saying, oh, bad capitalism is when people are greedy, like most people recognize capitalism runs on an acquisitive impulse and people are trying to get rich or being greedy. So sometimes people will use that. Usually, if you're looking at like a right-wing intellectual or something, they'll make it more about monopoly and say, see, that's not real free market capitalism because we have monopolies in whatever thing we're talking about. And therefore, it's not real capitalism. It's not real free markets. It's because of this monopoly, which is pretty shabby. The thing is about market competition is that someone wins competitions. George Orwell said that. He said the thing about market competition is that someone wins them. And then you have an incumbent firm that maybe there's only 2 firms or 3 or just one. Like those are all possible. And once you have firms that are that large, they have a lot of market power. Like they're in charge of society and their owners, we were talking about before, have a lot of influence there. So you always do have people, though, who will say, because obviously the system now is fucked. Like people feel like we still have a majority of people who say society is on the wrong track, and people can see all of our problems, like the economic instability and our environmental problems and these super powerful billionaires all the time. Mm-hmm. And so they can see and everything up to inflation and people trying to make ends meet. And so no one wants to take responsibility for this system. It is capitalism. We still have private ownership of resources. And we have markets that decide what products are made and what prices will be for them. Like that is what capitalism is markets and private property in most definitions. That said, though, socialism is more ambiguous in terms of how people define it, which, will happen. Political terms, it's not like medicine. The appendix is this thing in medicine. In socialism, it could be Stalin, it could be Bernie Sanders, it could be Scandinavia. And people say name a successful socialist country, I just go Scandinavia, and then they're forced to recognize that that's some of this could be democratic socialism, where you're starting with a prosperous market society and gradually nationalizing it, or having a greater union density where workers can gradually build up equity in the firms with the union over time. There's a pretty good case that a few countries in Northern Europe, like Sweden, would have reformed capitalism away over the course of the post-war decades if it hadn't been for Britain and America kind of keeping them from doing so. So that's a thing to refer to. And these days, most people will still say Venezuela or Cuba or maybe North Korea when they talk about communism. Real idiots will bring up China, which has been a capitalist country my whole lifetime. So there's like different dumb ways to look at it here. But fundamentally, to me, say bad people are greedy is not capitalism. That's the nature of the system. That's the whole idea, is that you have some capital, you invest it in order to make more capital. And when the system works, that's supposed to bring about more economic growth and the job creation and so on. But it all runs on turning, a buck into $1.50. So like saying it's like not about greed is just a strange, I think someone's like thinking about government corruption when they say that. And sounds like they're confusing the issue.
And the government corruption is like complex, I think, for a lot of people, because my thing is like, well, isn't this just liberal democracy?
Indeed, you are looking at people who are supposed to be enforcing like nice liberal rules. Sorry, you have to take this test to get your driver's license. You can only run an apartment if you get it up to this certain code. But they have to. These are just like little poorly paid clerks who are supposed to be regulating property developers and company operators that are worth millions or billions of dollars. Inevitably, they're going to find someone in that permit office who will give them the permit in exchange for $5,000. Like you will, I think that's very insightful. Like if you want to understand where corruption happens, it's some ill-paid, threadbare liberal state trying to regulate gigantic billionaires and their
Mhm.
life of leather and chrome. Like, it's just out of the question. So they're going to find someone in your organization who's, you know, maybe corrupt, or maybe just has a mom who needs extra expensive friggin' medicine. Like, they'll find that way through. It's like water going through a surface. Like, it will find
It'll find its
the
way
cracks
through.
in your roof. I
Yes.
guarantee it. It's like,
Yes. No, no, I totally agree. And this is kind of getting into the next question from chapter 4. Money buys power. In this chapter, Rob, you explore the deep connections between wealth and political influence. How has this dynamic grown in the past decade? And does money corrupt politics, or is the public-private relationship just a part of contemporary liberal democracy? And does this influence extend beyond the domestic politics into global governance? That's a long question.
yeah.
Sorry.
Oh,
Sorry.
you know, this
5-part question there.
people love those. Yeah, it has changed a lot, that relationship between money and politics, and how the economic ruling class engages with the government. The biggest way it's changed, and I guess this is a change from 13 years ago rather than just 10, but the big watershed change, of course, was the Citizens United ruling by the U.S. Supreme Court in 2011. This was when Bush was still in the middle of packing the court, and before Trump's trio of heinous right-wing 25-year-olds got added to the mix. But that basically removed any restrictions on organizations, especially business, from pouring money into politics, mainly through today's super PACs. Everyone's used now to hearing, oh, the campaign spent this many billions of dollars, including spending by their affiliated super PAC. That super PAC crap comes from Citizens United, and it means you can essentially have unlimited and like donor anonymized money entering politics. I mean, this is when what was already a huge amount of money in electoral campaigns just explodes, to where this year is expected to be just the White House race alone. Just the 2024 race between Trump and Harris is broadly expected to be about a $2 billion race. About $1 billion in ads and other campaign spending from each campaign. That's a lot of promises being made to people with money, and companies, you know, with employees with money. And by the time you've made, you know, $1 billion worth of promises, that's a lot of rich people who you promise not to raise their taxes, and you promise to cut their regulatory burden and stuff like that. You know, so that's a big piece of it. And additionally, though, you have your lobbying side, where entities with cash can move into existing governments, not just shaping them at election time, but trying to play a role in shaping policy that's made by incumbent policymakers. That's what lobbying, of course, is all about, a tremendously expensive but very widespread process. Wall Street, for example, just the usual collection of financiers, including the hedge funds, you know, the big banks and so on and so on. They have 6 lobbyists in D.C. for every member of Congress, for example. That's expensive. Not everyone can do that. The labor unions can't come anywhere near that level of organized, purchased political expression. But the Chamber of Commerce is totally able to do that kind of thing. So that plays a big role. And then the last thing I would say here is, remember, this is all about how money like influences government and controls policy. And of course, it's, if you're a millionaire, you can run and pay for your own campaign, which Trump pretends to do and other rich candidates actually do. But the last thing I would say is just remember, like, politics only gets to cover the things that the government does. You know, there's no election for whether we're going to close down the last factory in town this week. There's no election for, are we going to make chips domestically versus overseas? Companies make those decisions in the course of their regular investment decision-making processes with their corporate boards representing their mostly wealthy investors, you know? So to me, like, we need to recognize through campaigns and lobbying how money and wealthy people's corporate property, how it controls political processes. But bear in mind too, like, half of what matters in our lives isn't even in politics. It's just in the business world. And yeah, we decided that we're going to close down our building here, and all of you, your jobs will now be in this windowless warehouse because we're saving $1 on that. Like, that stuff never comes within the realm of politics, at least with, you know, capitalism. Mm-hmm. So I think we need to recognize how the money controls the political process, but also the political process is like small perimeter over the whole of society when just capitalism controls so much.
And this is where, you know, I think the gentleman I was talking to, when it came to the idea of corruption, didn't really understand NGOs and how they work with local governments,
Yes.
especially when it comes to, a plan. I'm from California. We have a very large homeless problem, as you know. So the state and local governments always work with nonprofits.
Yes.
There's no state-run state employees,
Oh no.
homeless shelters.
Oh, Jason, that would be awful. Oh my God. If the
That people are
government did.
afraid of that. That's the thing that these
Yeah.
NGOs
Yeah.
protected people. People are like, we don't want state-run facilities because state-run facilities are problematic. Even when we talk about state-run facilities, and this can be a subject if you choose not to tread in this water, I totally understand it because I don't have a very articulated opinion. But the idea of state-run mental facilities, which we're kind of moving towards here, I can't speak for where you are in Washington, but there's a because of the fact that many in policy are seeing, in their opinion, the failures of things like harm reduction. Right? Like, look, giving people dope and needles isn't working because they're just strung out. And a lot of people aren't from here. So there's really no reason for them to care to not get better. And we're just going to throw them in a facility.
Yeah.
That's going to be the solution. We're just going to throw people in a facility. Now, for right now, these facilities are going to be, privately ran. But I don't know if many people understand that relationship. And I think everyone sees that relationship as corruption because the only thing you're ever going to read about these places is maybe when they're constructed, when the plan rolls out, and if someone up top takes too much money, is skimming, if conditions are bad.
Yeah. That is like would that exact thing you just described does seem to be like what a lot of especially like local political observers consider corruption. And often you can make the case it just comes from the fact that the state's not allowed to directly do anything. For the money that we're spending, we could just build some housing. There's publicly owned land and there's a whole burdensome process for building new real estate, which will happen when you have large established cities. They have millions of people living closely together. They don't necessarily want to have an insane amount of additional construction taking up green space or straining the infrastructure that's already there. It's not outrageous for people to have a NIMBY attitude because we all have to make our way through society. But the issue often with a lot of the time with this is the government's not allowed to provide services. You can't run a homeless shelter, let alone public housing. We can't have government directly doing basic construction for the military. We have to hire these contractors like Halliburton for stupendous amounts of money compared to what the public sector is capable of doing. And after all, this is ultimately why things like Medicare are much more efficient in terms of cost per services delivered than the private insurance industry. It's because they do it directly and they aren't leaving aside a ton of revenue for the profit margin and having to hire a bunch of people to make sure no one's getting too much health care, which is what half of what hospital administration is all about. So to me, that's the interesting thing is we're not allowed to just directly build housing to the extent that that's a possibility.
Yeah.
For the homeless. We have to find some NGO, and then you go on TV and you say, we're partnering with Gen Con here, and they're going to do it great. And then you have a whole additional middlemanning layer between the services being provided in the state. And it's very easy to take $1,000 worth of housing allowance and build $900 worth of housing. It definitely creates an additional layer where that corruption is very easy. It just reminds me, I remember, it's been too long. I can't remember whose account this was online, but some right winger, posted a picture of Soviet Ukrainian public housing buildings and said, "Is there anything more depressing than public housing under communism?" And of course, someone just retweeted that and said, "Homelessness." That is more depressing. These buildings don't have much character. I might as well be living on a steam grate in front of the Union Station. Good Lord.
It's pretty disgusting. There's homelessness here. You see, it is dwarfed by what you see on the other side of the imaginary line called the border. And much of what you see has to do with deportees with no families.
Yeah, rotting in some border community until an administration feels like allowing them to claim asylum.
Yeah, and it's pretty disgusting. It's really sad.
Yeah, it's
It's
rough, man.
extremely heartbreaking, actually.
Yeah.
But trying to get people to understand the public-private partnerships in which that's where your tax dollars go. There was an initiative maybe 5 years ago, maybe even 8 years ago, where LA residents voted on these two initiatives to be taxed more to build housing for the homeless. They were like, fine, take
Yeah,
more out.
you
Just
would want
build
it. Like it's congested. Build some public trans. Like people are willing to pay some public assessments and taxes if they feel like they're going to get a service out of it. And taking all these, half of America's homeless are like ex-veterans. Like it's insane what
oof,
we
yeah.
allow to happen to people in this country after they made the biggest risk to serve the country. They think, and that's the least we deserve is to put them in a damn apartment. And of course, many of these people have, as you said already, like serious, mental health issues and so on. And it's a whole other question of how we're going to maintain these people. But I remember I would just say even like hyper libertarians like Milton Friedman, who's was one of Reagan's economic advisors and wrote the Capitalism and Freedom book that I wrote a whole book debunking in anger.
One of my favorite books that actually got stolen
Thanks,
from me. If you remember that show we talked about.
It's a long time ago. I definitely do remember. Of course I do, man. Yeah, that was a great time. But he says, and I put this in the book because it's interesting. He said, of course, because he was a big, of course, arch privatization fan. But he himself said, of course, there's some things you can't rely on charity to just fix for us. What are we going to do with all the madmen, as he put it, writing back in like the 1960s or something like that? Like no church is in a position to like put up like 50 like schizophrenics. Like it's a public institution. Like private hospitals don't make money from that. It's the public sector or they go to jail. Like those are the options. So even libertarians kind of shrink from insisting on putting like the legitimately institutionalized under the care of just some charitable entity that hopefully will take care of them. So I would say even just the arch minimum government advocates will admit the scope of some government for specific issues like that exact one.
Yeah, it's like one of those things where I'm just like, well, I'm trying to explain, like, this is the world you wanted. You thought this was the winner.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, look how horrible it is. I'm like, yeah, no shit. I hope you're happy. Every one of these things happened because you got something that made you go, yay.
They're like, this is a corrupt politicians. I was like, this is just the way it's supposed to function. Like,
yeah, man. Like, billionaires aren't like nice people either. Like, it's not like government is the institution. Like, we do also have capitalism. You may have heard of that.
Oh yeah, that's not the thing. It's like, oh no, these people were just corrupt, man. These politicians are corrupt. I was like,
oh, dude,
sure, okay, but
yeah, anyone can be corrupt. You have to be in a position of influence to do corruption. Is what I would say to them. It's like, okay, you're like seeing the corruption as bad. Like they have corruption opportunities because they're in a position of power. It's like Protestantism and the Catholic Church, and they were being too corrupt and they're extending indulgences to wealthy people so they could sin freely. Like the problem, like maybe you're corrupt in your heart, but you can't do anything corrupt until you're in a position of authority or a hierarchical system. That's all. So you need to like look at what that system is if you want to get rid of some corruption, like those early Protestants did.
Well, let's move on to chapter 5. Your favorite chapter, destroying the planet for profit. Quote, the climate crisis is the ultimate failure of capitalism. It prioritizes short-term profits over long-term survival, unquote. Why are the richest people and companies the most responsible for environmental destruction? And how do they continue to evade accountability? Part 2, why is capitalism, in your view, incompatible with serious climate action?
Yeah, okay. Well, great questions. So the wealthy definitely do have a special role in the destruction of the environment. Kind of starts with some obvious stuff. If you're wealthy, by definition, you're getting more income and therefore able to consume more goods and services than a middle class or working class or poor household can. And just by doing more economic activity, you therefore consume more energy. And that means you'll have more, for example, carbon dioxide emissions, which are affecting climate change. So these aspects have always been there. But we do have some like more modern research on this, and it's pretty stunning stuff. It's like the World Inequality Database, which is a really excellent, I should mention their name, a really good public inequality research consortium whose work I'm a big fan of, and I have a bunch of it right here. And I use their work very frequently and cite their numbers a lot in the basic sections of the book. But they also have a very interesting and fast developing work on accounting for climate emissions by household wealth. And of course, I'm going straight to climate change here just because, as we said, it is often recognized these days as being the most urgent or the most immediately recognized part of the environmental crisis of today, in addition to things like the extinction crisis and microplastics in our bodies and stuff like that. But looking at climate change, it's interesting. The WID finds that the wealthiest 1% of households by wealth globally emit 17% of the world's carbon dioxide equivalents, which is, a very disproportionate amount. But they also found that the wealthiest 10% of households globally emit 47% of the world's carbon dioxide emissions, like almost half from that very richest 10% of households. And if you look at it, it is more consumption, a lot more energy use, and especially more transportation, big fancy yachts, which we can talk about. And of course, those private jets. So cool. You fly in a private jet that you own or with a few other people that you own, like condominium style. You don't have to go through the horrible, stupid airports and awful TSA. And
hey, you've never flown on Jet Suite X, so don't you fucking shit on that.
Oh, Jason, stop it. Yeah, it's pretty juicy stuff. These planes are kind of nuts. They cost tens of millions or more to purchase. But of course, they're insanely emissions inefficient. They're about 10 times as heavy emitters per passenger mile as even a commercial flight is, let alone riding on an electric train or something like that. So pretty brutal, and especially because of specific features of how wealthy people use these planes. So, for example, they're disproportionately short flights compared to commercial flights. People do them to take little convenient hops.
Yeah.
So like Elon Musk, thanks to the account that he tried to ban after he bought Twitter, X. He tried to ban that, Elon Jet, I believe was the handle, and now it's delayed by 24 hours, but you can still view it. Fascinating stuff to see where he or other billionaires like Bill Gates or, big celebrities like Taylor Swift or whoever. You can see broadly, where they're flying in their private jets just by monitoring their, plane-specific transponder. And it's interesting stuff. So you could see Elon Musk, for example, taking flights on his private plane between San Jose and San Francisco.
That's not even that long of a drive.
Like in the Bay.
It's probably maybe an hour.
That's like an hour on the BART. Yeah, that's not that far.
You could take the train. You take well, now you can take the BART. You can literally take the BART now from San Jose to San Francisco.
It's just amazing because, of course, these planes, besides only having a tiny number of people in them, they're extra inefficient on short legs like that because planes emit the largest part of their emissions equivalent during takeoff and landing. So if there's less actual cruising, it just drives up the inefficiency. And the last thing I'll say about these jets, as far as the inefficiency of it, is I had some research study by an NGO in the UK, Transport and the Environment, I think was their name, if I recall that correctly. It's in the book, of course. And they made the point that looking at the European Union, which is the data they were looking at specifically for wealthy people and their flying, they found that for private jets in the EU, 41% of flights are empty legs.
Whoa.
No one on the plane. You're flying it to pick up the boss in Monaco and fly him to Paris or whatever. I mean, obviously the crew, or at least the pilot, is on board, but that's it. Amazing stuff. And of course, the planes are as tricked out as you can imagine. Crystal furnishings, Christophe flatware. There was one that had interior trim made entirely out of alligator skin. Just insane fixtures for insane people who have been so wealthy for so long that they've lost touch with reality. And of course, you're making this huge extra contribution to destroying the climate. Why? Because you couldn't stand to fly first class. Because first class, you still have to walk through the plane area.
Poor people, they walk by you. They look.
They look by you. They can look right at you. insufferable. So with this, you don't have to do that. Fascinating stuff. I mean, this is all from memory. I really invite people to take a look at that section of the book. It's juicy.
And wherever you're watching or listening to the show, there's a link in the description to Rob's book.
Oh yeah, hey,
From
bombs away, folks. It's bargain priced. Jump on.
right on Haymarket. I got the Haymarket link on there.
Of course, yeah.
What's interesting to me is, as much as I see people eat the rich, hate rich people, all rich people are bad, rich people suck, hate, and this is across the board. You can, I don't care what podcasts you listen to or watch. It's an industry. There's an anti-capitalism industry in cinema. Like I said, nomad lad shall ever cross this doorstep. No man lad. Nope. That movie with Frances McDormand
Quite
won an Oscar. You have Parasite that won an Oscar. Joker, I think Joaquin Phoenix won an Oscar. These are class-based films, definitely anti-capitalism films, definitely anti-wealth films, but nothing's changing in the sense of there's still an influencer culture that is extremely prevalent. There's still an idea of branding.
Oh yeah.
People can only see themselves as brand.
Oh my God, that's like, it's a very, very powerful force in the social media era. Oh yeah.
And there's things in LA, and maybe you know about this, maybe you don't. There's a great documentary that I don't think we watched it on movie night, but I've been wanting to. It's called Fake Famous. And it's about this dude that's a tech writer that wants to make these people with very small, like a few hundred people on their Instagram, into Instagram influencers. He wants to see if he can do it. And in that process, he learns about the influencer machine and even the tools that are supposed to weed out the fake influencers. So like Chat GPT tools, right? There's tools that are supposed to, well, this was written by a bot, not by a human. The same thing exists in influencer culture. These likes and followers are bought. They're not real. That software didn't work because they bought they tried it out because they had a person that was going for an audition and they were running them through that software. They were like, oh no, we bought, these 175,000 likes. You can buy engagement in the sense of not just likes, but comments.
Amazing.
But there were fake jets. There were sets of fake jets.
Oh yes, that is true. That is a developing market. You can go, and usually they're like real jets. They're decommissioned. They don't fly no more. But you can get in, and it's an interior. It's an authentic interior, and you take your photo, and you're very hot, and you make you put on your wealthy person outfit and take the picture, and oh my God, she's rich. She's got a rich
look, they just ate another sundae, right? And so there's this. I call it there's a neoliberal realism that we're constantly branding ourselves. Even people that exist in this realm of left media, especially a certain aspect of the younger generation, can only speak in marketing terms. They only speak generationally.
You got to market yourself better, Jason.
I can't just see the world as a market, right?
Oh yes, you can. Oh yes, you can.
But you know what I mean? There's so. I do think this is a very important book that people should read, because I think, you are dealing with this same thing every day. People coming to your class that are indoctrinated into this system, that suffer from this neoliberal realism as well, only speaking in marketing terms, using generations to just dissect everyone into groups.
Yes.
Right? I have to market myself, and that's all I can see. That seems to be the real hurdle to even get people to think about another way, because all we can do is hope to reform capitalism, it feels like.
Yeah, totally. There's like by now we have a lot of experience with how systems like capitalism kind of perpetuate themselves and kind of get people to not think about getting out of them much or just come to accept them, as being pretty natural. And getting people, just focus on you're a commodity and how can you, an object, get the highest price that an object can get. And the tendency is just to get you to internalize your subordinate position in the labor market reality. Like you're going to be kissing the ass of every hiring committee, and you're gonna hope that they give you a decent job, and you'll thank your lucky stars if you get anything halfway decent out of it. And any failures you have are because you didn't market yourself. Like this is just capitalist brainwashing 101. And in a lot of countries, there's a limited ability to get people to believe this because the countries existed before capitalism.
Mhm.
Not America. I mean, it did, but it's such a short period before industrialization and mercantile capitalism just consumes the social fabric of this country historically in the 19th century that here it's like a very ingrained, just very uncontroversial, natural thing. It gets said in the business program that I work in, all the time, that you have to market yourself and make your brand better and stuff like that, which is, pretty gross. We're talking about human beings here, and it should be about society providing services for you, not you making yourself into a better tool to fit into a slot that's been designed by some institution there. But to me, all this stuff is just ways of controlling people. Making people think capitalism is natural or it's just never going to go away. All of these things are like intellectually unjustifiable claims that no one ever really tries to back up. You just claim it, But no, to me, this is all stuff that we should laugh off. I would just say, like, no one ever thought we'd get rid of slavery. I mean, that was, in the 1860s, up until the 1860s, everyone thought this is one of the foundational things about America. And next thing you know, we've had the one big expropriation of private property by the government that has ever happened in this country, which is emancipation. Freeing up a stupendous amount of market value private property because we decided that people are human beings, even if they look marginally different from us. So like this to me is like things like that. Like this is just the system that's natural. We'll always have it. That's what everyone thinks until a day before the guillotines come out. Like everyone thinks we reach a breaking point. So it's just historically, there's no reason to believe that. People should try to think around it if they can, easier said than done.
Well, look, I've kept you for long enough. It's been an hour. His name is Rob Larson. The book has a very long title. Hold on. I have it written down. Masters of the Universe. The obscene wealth of the ruling class, what they do with their money, and why you should hate them even more. Wherever you are watching or listening to the show, there's links in the description. Rob, I know you have some public appearances coming up. You want to pitch those?
Oh, yeah, sure. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Yeah, I was on Doug Henwood's show, which went live today as well, Behind the News. People can check that out. Recording a couple other shows this coming week. The big live event I have coming up imminently is a week from today. My people in the Pacific Northwest, please come to Elliott Bay Books in the Capitol Hill neighborhood of Seattle on September 12th. Yeah, a week from today as we speak, next Thursday, the 12th at 7 p.m. I'll be doing a fun book event at Elliott Bay Books, one of the most fun Seattle bookstores. And, we'll have a fun presentation there. You can enjoy the incredibly fun bookstore that Elliott Bay is. And if you want, I can sign your book for you and slightly reduce its value by doing that. Come on out, folks. I'd love to see you. Love to chat. It's a lot of fun, so we'll have a good time. People should check that out.
Well, there you go. His name is Rob Larson. I'll be back tomorrow night with my co-host Mac, where we're going to do makeup episode of Beyond the Red Zone. Again, I'm so sorry I missed it yesterday. Just couldn't make it. On behalf of Rob and everybody here at TIR, I'd like to say thank you, and we are out.